Hey everybody, this is Brian Yellow. On episode number 40, I had Brian Converse on the show. He's a speculative author. He writes 4 hours a day. He gets on a bus every single morning just outside of Colorado Springs and writes on this bus for 2 hours. Gets off in Denver, works all day, gets on the bus in Denver, goes home. 2 hours on the bus, writes every second on this bus. That's miraculous. I mean, it's amazing what this guy does for his art. I mean, granted, he's on the bus anyway. If it was me, I'd be listening to a podcast, I'd be reading a book, but this gentleman is working for his art. And it transfers. He has a kid that's going to be an Olympian. It's already a junior Olympian for pistol shooting. It is amazing. He was a joy to talk to. And, well, here he is, Brian Converse. See, right now you're working on a trilogy of science fiction novels, but you've also worked on horror and fantasy as well. Do you have a favorite genre, or is it primarily science fiction that gets your juices going?
I grew up reading all kinds of stories. I was reading Stephen King when I was probably 8 years old.
Oh, really? I'm the same way, actually. I remember reading Rage in second grade. I don't know how I ended up with it in my hands, but I remember bringing it to school and reading that book and getting into a lot of trouble, unfortunately.
You know,
Yeah, he's one of my favorite authors, actually.
Luckily, my mom is a real big horror fan, so she didn't mind.
She didn't mind too much. I don't remember anybody complaining either. Who are you reading nowadays? Who is it? Still Stephen King, or I mean, who? I mean, there's so many authors out there right now that it's so hard to pick and choose. I mean, are you reading it all?
Oh yeah,
Somebody's producing content.
you know, it, um, I read still quite a bit when my children allow me the time.
Exactly, right. I'm a father too. I have no time to read anymore. I want to so bad.
You know,
So,
I've got four kids under the age of 12, so they're a handful.
you know
Um,
what I wanted to ask you about your children? I think I happened upon this is what I love about Twitter. You could follow thousands of people, and every once in a while, somebody will roll past you like yourself, and you'll see something fantastically interesting. One of your children is in the how do you say this? Junior Olympics on the pistol shooting team.
yeah, he's been shooting for about 2 years now, and he's kind of the level underneath junior, so he'll be moving up probably in the next couple of years. But yeah, it's been a real interesting couple of years training down. He's training down at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs.
Well, that's fascinating. One year, I believe it was not this Olympics, obviously in Brazil, because I couldn't watch any of it. It was the previous Olympics. I sat there just enthralled by the shooting events. They're just so interesting. The level of competition is just amazing. Can you go into detail as to exactly what pistol shooting entails?
Sure. He fires it's basically an air pistol, and it's pellets. And um, when he started, he had actually gone in to start shooting rifle because that's what interested him. And they let him try both the pistol and a rifle, and he decided he liked the pistol better. And basically, it's called progressive pistol, and it goes from them sitting two-handed to sitting one-handed to standing with a what they call a T-bar support because their muscles obviously haven't reached maturity yet, and they don't want their arms getting tired or getting tennis elbow or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they shoot 10-meter course, and it's we go twice a week for him to practice, and it's just shooting over and over and going through the same process each shot. It takes a lot of both mind and body control, and I think that's helped my son actually. and it's very precise, and the way that the scores are calculated, that it's always very close at the end between competitors. And just one little thing, your breathing, your trigger pull, your concentration, anything can throw off your aim. And so,
Yeah, that's what amazes me most about that sport. I mean, it's really all about just the most minute detail,
right,
how your elbow lays on the ground, how you pull that trigger, how you're holding your breath, or not holding your breath, actually. It's how you're breathing, meditation, all that stuff is fascinating. I gather your military history, your past in the military got him interested in that, or how did you guys develop an interest in the sport?
it's funny. My military history didn't play any part in it as far
Oh,
as
really?
it's actually, we were at a Bass Pro Shop near my house, and they had kind of activities outside of it for kids, and one of them was shooting BB guns, and he was like crack shot, hitting it even with the wind blowing, the paper moving, and he's like, well, maybe I should try this, and we kind of just looked into it, and just happened to be that the little shooting club was for the kind of the pre-Olympic shooters down at the Olympic Training Center, which is about half an hour from our house.
When you were a kid, and obviously you played with BB guns. When I was a kid, I played with BB guns. Would you have thought that there was an opportunity to go to the Olympics playing with BB guns?
No, I had no idea.
I mean, either. I mean, shot at trees, and my nephew shot at squirrels and birds. I mean, I never thought there was an opportunity to go represent America and, you know, potentially win a gold medal playing with BB guns. That is really,
Right.
really cool. And, I talk to authors all the time, and you really have to be you have to be knowledgeable in so many different types of weaponry and the history of things. Has this excited you in terms of your writing, kind of knowing that, you know, the minutia of this sport, has it represented itself in your writing at all?
Um, Not so much right now because of uh, I guess the science fiction genre that I'm writing in at the moment. It's all kind of made up weapons um, that they're using, and my past military career, I think, played some part in that as far as my knowledge of weapons. Because even though I was a medic in the army, and my weapon was a 9 millimeter handgun, I still I shot uh, all kinds of U.S. Army weapons and German Army weapons when I was stationed over there, and so it has played a role in my knowledge of weaponry. But this is just it's funny. Um, like you said, I never would have thought that my son would be shooting pellet guns and possibly competing one day in the Olympics.
How soon could that possibly take place? I mean, you said he's under 12 now, so what age do you think he could go and wear the uniform or wear the colors?
Um, they've got a girl on the team right now that just made the junior Olympic team, or I guess she made the Olympic team not that long ago, and she just turned 17. So
Wow.
he may have about 5 years to go.
I can't remember. Did Paris or Los Angeles get the Olympics? I know that was in the news just recently, but I stopped paying attention. Do you
Yeah,
know?
I don't know
No,
actually
me either.
the next one.
It's interesting. It would be a lot cheaper for you if it's Los Angeles. It can get kind of expensive. I remember hearing the cost for parents who get a child in the Olympics is astronomical.
My 2 year old just walked in.
My 2-year-olds are being put down to bed at the moment. I don't know how quiet it's going to be. They're like 2 floors up, but I was just listening to them stomping around, screaming. You have boy or girl 2-year-old?
Boy,
Boy.
3 boys
Yeah.
and a girl.
Oh, okay. The girls are sweet at 2 years old. My son can he's surprised that he gets this high pitched shriek. It was just out of nowhere. He'll just start shrieking. Like, dude, where do you get that from?
Yeah, yeah, my son's the same way.
I don't know where. And it's not my little girl. You would think she would be the shrieker, right? I guess she will eventually develop into it, but right now it's my little boy. Um, so medic in the army. Wow. It's an interestingly very stressful job. But you're writing about an MP, right? In your novel.
Um,
Or police. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah, he's a police
I
officer.
was thinking that you were an MP. That's where the confusion came from. I was like, oh, he's got to be an MP. No,
Yeah,
so he's a police officer.
right.
And you're writing from a can you give me the gist of your piece?
Sure. Um, it started out just a dream of mine of this completely white round room with no markings in it, and these people waking up and not knowing how they got there, and kind of went from there. Kind of me thinking, well, how would they have gotten there? What happened to them before that? And so the story kind of created itself, I guess, in my imagination. And one of the people uh, was this police officer from Detroit. Um, and he sort of became my main protagonist and main character of the piece. A lot of the book is seen from his point of view as events unfold, and um, just he kind of created himself. It was very strange because a lot of times it's more difficult, to create that character and have a backstory for him and know this character intimately. And
Mm-hmm.
James Dempsey, the main character of my book, kind
It's a
of
great name. It's a great setting too in terms of dystopian Detroit. I mean, you really can't get much worse than that in this country.
yeah, and
You
he's
want
a homicide detective on top of that. So
so he's busy.
yeah, been very kind of burned out at the beginning of this novel. Contemplating retirement, contemplating finding a different job. So, um, he goes from being that burned out cop character to suddenly waking up aboard an alien spacecraft, and things totally changed for him.
When do you start the novel? Is it in the future or is it present day?
Um, yeah, it's around present day. I didn't put a whole lot of clues in because I didn't want it to be, oh, this is, you know, right now that it's happening. It could be 10 years ago. It could be 10 years in the future. That's something that I've left up to the reader
Mm-hmm.
to, decide for themselves.
And
Um,
you're traditionally published with this, or did you decide to indie publish it?
no, I'm indie published.
Okay. How about your cover art? Did you do that yourself?
No, I searched for a while for a cover artist. I was on Twitter a lot, looking at all the various, I guess, avenues of artwork. Whether it was, paying somebody $5 on Fiverr to do it. To
Fiverr's an interesting avenue. I hear that that's a great way to go, but unfortunately, there's some negative stories I've heard.
Yeah, and I ended up finding this artist from the UK, just because we happened to follow each other. But and I looked at his stuff when I first joined Twitter and thought, oh, great stuff. And when I decided to self-publish, which was probably a year later, I, like I said, I researched all these other cover artists, and some of them are just kind of stock covers where they've made something and you slap your name on it, and I didn't really want to go that way. I wanted to be more specific to my story. So I contacted this guy, and we spoke over Skype a few times, and he seemed to really get what I wanted, and we hit it off pretty well. And I have a lot of artwork books, and he has the same ones. So we had a similar taste in, you know, cover art and, you know, fantasy art, I guess. So it seemed the right way to go, and so hopefully, you know, I'm going to have him doing the next two covers as well.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast that you had done with oh, I can't remember exactly the podcast. The oh, do I still have the Wooden Pants podcast?
Yes, yes.
That's what it was. They said that this was already set to be a trilogy, and I find that interesting. That's kind of a set way to go, isn't it? Where you already know before you start writing that it's going to be a trilogy, or did you finish it and go, you know what, I got two more stories with this character?
Well, you know, the funny thing was, I said this, I think, in that interview, was this started out as a comic book.
Oh yeah, I wanted to get into that actually because I'm looking at this cover art going, my God, it really is like you visualize this as a comic book. I mean, the cover's gorgeous. I really love it. I love the female looking out the window. I think that's very, very well done. I love it in terms of the action.
Mm-hmm.
It's very you can tell there's a lot happening. I'm interested in reading it. The guy did a great job. What's his name? The cover artist.
Lawrence Mann.
Lawrence Mann. Ah,
M-A.
there he is right there.
Yeah, and he does a lot of covers, and, you know, a lot of commission pieces. And, you know, I try to get his name out there as much as possible because I really like his work. You know, it's kind of a double-edged thing where it's like I want him to, you know, stay on my stuff, and
Yeah. But you're not writing
yeah,
enough novels for him though. You need to be like you
right,
need to be producing more content.
yeah.
Unfortunately, he's gonna be starving waiting for you to write enough novels to feed his family and pay his mortgage. How long does it take you to write the trilogies? I mean, how close are you to being done with this particular story?
Um, you know, I'm actually probably 85% done on the second book, and
Okay, cool.
maybe 75 to 80% on the third book.
Wow, you're a fast writer. How long has it been since you wrote the first one?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm a fast writer. Like I said, this started as comic like 15 years ago. And
Okay.
I took that story and decided, oh, this, I think, better works as a novel. And once I sort of transferred it into novel form and started writing it out and expanding it and everything, I'm like, this is not one book. This is going to need to be, you know, more.
When you started writing it as a comic book, that means you scripted it out, you panel by paneled it, right? You had directions for artists. How
Right.
far did you get? Was it just one book? Was it many books that you had written, or what did your comic book script look like
Um,
in terms of the story as an overall arc?
you know, it was originally created as a submittal that I was submitting to Image Comics.
Mm,
I had some friends there, and I knew Jim Valentino just from meeting him at a few Comic Cons. You know, I was friends with his assistant at the time, and she actually edited my submittal for me. Um, and at the time, I
did
had,
she give you notes on it?
yes,
What did she say in
they're
terms of what did she say about your submittal?
well, you know, I had never written for comics before. I'd read a lot of comics, but
Yeah.
this is sort of my getting my feet wet in the comic
So
field.
you were going from fan to actual attempt to be employee, basically. And that's what's interesting about it.
So I was kind of learning as I went, and she
Uh-huh.
helped quite a bit in letting me know, you know, this is kind of the way you need to write a comic, you know, as far as, you know, ending each page so that you know, that reader wants to turn the page and, you know, go to the next panel, and writing for the artist so that they know exactly what you want for each panel, or if it's a, you know, somebody who's been in the field more, you know, some artists just like, oh, this is what the story on the page is, and they like to break it up themselves. So
In terms of the script writing process of writing a comic book, I've heard it's one of the more difficult ones to do.
yeah, it is.
It's a huge communication process. Like writing a script is hard. Writing a play is, hard, but not that hard. You're just writing dialogue. But in terms of writing for comic books, it's so difficult because you don't know who the artist is going to be necessarily,
Right.
unless you do, and then it's simple. You're holding hands the entire time. It's only one person, but it's so intimate. If you've got that person right there, boom, you guys are off to the races. You can just go ahead and do the whole comic book, good to go. But if you're sitting alone writing a script, oh man, it's so hard. You don't know if you're communicating the right thing, too much. I mean, what was she saying overall? That you weren't communicating enough? You were communicating too much? I mean, what was her overall note for you in terms of your script?
Probably that I was putting too much information down.
That's interesting, isn't it? As a novelist, I mean, you can't get enough information on the page.
Right,
I
and
mean,
that's
yeah,
why I ultimately decided, this won't work as well as a comic as it will, as a novel, because I just have way too much information.
have you ever thought about going back and doing another comic book script and just giving it a shot? I mean, you're obviously meeting artists.
um, I have, and I've actually done a couple of short stories for various comic book anthologies. So I have written some scripts since then, but right now I'm doing more, working on a novel and doing short stories, that type of thing.
But prior to writing this as a comic book script, had you ever written a fiction or anything prior to writing that script?
Um, I'd actually started out writing poetry.
Oh, interesting. In the speculative genre, or just like
Just,
getting stuff out there on paper type thing?
yeah, just kind of, whatever came into my head, and it started when I joined the army, and just
Mhm.
going through everything and needing to get my feelings out and down on paper, and
What's
uh,
very interesting about poetry, they say that short fiction is dying, like it's going away potentially, and poetry is definitely disappearing as an art form.
yeah,
It's not being published. You can't make any money. I know people who get excuse me, who are getting degrees in it and that are just lost. You know what I mean? They float out into the world and they become cashiers at Starbucks. You can't have too much of an artistic career if your soul is slowly dying tip by tip. I feel bad for them because they're really good artists. They're getting PhDs and who knows what they're going to do with their.
I have a BA in English literature from University of San Diego,
Oh,
and
okay.
I, I haven't used it. Basically, I've been a marketing person for 17 years.
You don't use your literature degree in marketing?
Not so much, because a lot of what I work on is proposals and that type of thing, and it helps as far as my writing in the proposal, but it's not something I normally use in my work. Uh, my real job, I guess you call it.
That's very interesting. I got my degree in creative writing from South Florida, and well, I guess this is my job, so I guess I use it all the time. I mean, talk about making money, air quotes floating up in the air. Then I guess I don't do anything, but I do it. I use it all the time. But anyway, I mean, I would think that in marketing, you would have to use it. You have to shape that stuff. You learned what the greats were doing. You learned what Shakespeare was doing. I mean, did you have a favorite when you went through your undergrad? Who were you studying the most? I mean, who were you taking over and over and over again? Or was it just general classes, like your Brit Lit and your American Lit?
Yeah, there were a lot of general classes, but a lot of Shakespeare,
Hmm.
a lot of keep.
Talk about king of marketing, huh? Shakespeare knew what he was doing.
Yeah, you don't have a word for something, just make it up.
Right? Just make it up. You're having trouble, just pretend like you know what you're talking about, and you become world famous for 600 years. That's what we're doing, huh? So, that's so fascinating. So you went to University of San Diego. You got a degree in marketing. You joined the army before or after that?
I joined the Army right out of high school. So I was 17. I had to get my mom to sign off for me because I wasn't 18 yet.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so that was 2 years active duty right as the Desert Storm started.
Wow, okay.
Um, and then came back. I grew up in Michigan, so went from Michigan to Germany for a couple of years during the Gulf War. Never went to Iraq,
Oh,
thankfully.
you didn't go to Iraq. My dad served over there during that conflict, and I was a kid. I was in like seventh, eighth grade. It was miserable. I do not ever want to have the experience of having a loved one in conflict combat. Not fun.
Uh,
You
and,
got out, or did you stay in for 20?
no, I got out. I actually did my full time, my 2 years, and then joined the reserve for another four or so.
Hmm.
So luckily, when I got out, I was attached to a unit in my hometown, which a lot of people don't get. But I was a medic for a military police unit in my hometown, so I hung around the MPs a lot.
Okay, well, I thought there would be MPs eventually in this story.
Yeah,
So I
and
thought for sure to hear those two letters pop out. I don't know why. I figured there would be eventually. Um, so obviously you had some familiarity with Detroit, and you saw it in its brighter side back in the 80s. You grew up with it being a little bit more brighter sided,
well,
a little happier storied.
I went to Detroit quite a bit to go to Tigers games and Red Wings uh, and concerts in Detroit. A lot of the larger venues are in Detroit, so you got to travel there to see anybody good.
So your character, when you're writing him, is he from a Detroit from your childhood, or is he from
Well,
the Detroit that exists today? So, I
he's
mean, is it the same? It's not the same Detroit, right? I mean, in my mind, I've never been, but I know from the news and I know from Marshall Mathers that it's not the same Detroit. Am I right or wrong on that?
That's right, and he's basically me remembering, growing up and watching Tigers games and that type of thing, going with his families to the Tigers game, and he joined the military out of high school, and so a lot of his backstory is kind of autobiographical
Hmm.
for me. There's parts of me, I think, in every one of the main characters. There's five humans.
Yeah,
Um,
I appreciate what your wife said on your webpage too. You can't pull yourself out of your writing. I think that was your wife. I assume since you guys have the same last name, I don't know. Maybe somebody else wrote that for you.
yeah,
She or that person said that you can't pull yourself out of your writing, and that makes sense that you'd be writing. What's the word I'm looking for here? Um, it's gone. My brain is rotting slowly. I'm getting too old.
the kids do,
What's that?
the kids do that. It's like,
Okay, I can blame my kids. Good. I
yeah,
thought it was just old age.
I've gotten much grayer since my first son was born.
The most depressing thing is sitting in a barber chair and saying, "Okay, cut my hair," and all of a sudden, all this white hair falls off into my lap. It's like, okay, you're cutting somebody else's hair. This is not coming from my head. No. Oh, it was always slightly gray. I was in the army too. I remember when dark hair would fall off,
Mhm.
just buzz me down, like dark hair would fall off onto my lap. Be fine with it. Wouldn't even think about it. But now it's all like gray and black. No.
In my case, disappearing.
No. Oh, they tell me I'm okay with that. I always ask them, tell me, is it still there? I said, don't worry about it. You're never gonna lose your hair. So your character is from Detroit, and Detroit is horrible. He gets picked up, and the interesting thing to me is he doesn't go into a situation that's better, right? He goes into a situation that's worse, but he actually can make a difference. Am I
Right,
getting this?
right, and in some ways, it is better for him. He feels free. He feels like he's been freed from that life of, see, in his back of his head, he knows he's going to be a cop until he dies, or they force him to retire.
Hmm.
He's kind of stuck in that life,
A
and
tidal wave of death and destruction.
right,
Can't do
and
anything. Bad people are moving in, good people are moving out.
yeah, and so once he realizes that, I he's like, I have no reason to go back. I have no ties to Earth anymore. Even, I'm free to do what I choose, and these aliens are asking for our help, and it's something that I can make a difference, like you said. And so he's got that sense of freedom, and also just wonder, because he's been kind of thrust into this whole new uh, outlook on not only the Earth but the universe. As far as
Does
the
it connect back to Earth at all in terms of is he protecting Earth from anything ultimately, or is he just completely removed from the whole experience, his whole past
yeah, he, as far as he's concerned, he's not even sure he's going to go back to Earth
at
in
all?
trilogy.
It's
Um,
interesting. So you're writing three parts. It came from a comic book. Do you ever picture a future for these three books that involve going back to its roots, potentially revisiting this with an artist and sketching this out? I mean, how much did you work with? Did we say his name was Lance Woods? No, Lawrence Mann. Wow, got that wrong so badly.
Very close.
Not even close at all. Mr. Mann, working with him and maybe even potentially, how much did you work with him on the cover? Was it kind of a back and forth, or did he come up with a sketch and then you said, no, work this way?
I gave him a couple of scenes from the book, and we kind of talked about which one would work better, um, as as a still picture on the cover, and ultimately decided on the scene where the team of humans is and their alien allies are being chased from uh, this space station by basically the galactic police, and are forced to use their powers to disable the other ship so they can get away. Um, and so it was kind of, I gave him this idea. He, we, like I said, we worked over Skype, so I could see as he sat there and kind of sketched it out,
That's cool.
placing people, and within the ship, and having the the open kind of doorway there of them looking through and seeing the other ship. And so there was uh, just a couple of revisions as far as placement of characters, that type of thing. What would be the best, and I actually, once his cover art was done, I went back and made sure that my story matched, what his cover art said. And there was just a couple of things I needed to change. But, I think it worked better that way.
How did that feel as somebody who actually started this process wanting to, help develop comics, graphic novels? Did that kind of feel so good that you wanted to revisit that dream? Or I mean, obviously you just achieved something, you wrote a novel, not many people do. But did that reopen that love of the more graphic medium of writing for graphic novels?
Um, Surprisingly, not really.
So you found something in yourself with writing novels that this
Yeah,
cover.
and this, when I created it as a comic book, I actually had put a team together, So I had an artist, um an inker, a letterer, and a colorist. And so we finished 5 pages of this comic. And now looking back on it, you know, I give up. I feel like I give up too much control. I guess.
Well, that's what you would have to do, right? Being a part of a team, you kind of really would have to give up a lot of control.
You basically write the script, and from then it's in the hands of these other people.
Right? Doesn't Stan Lee kind of say that a lot? Isn't that the rumor with him? Is he would just kind of say, "I want this to happen," and he would leave it up to his artist to kind of make that happen.
Right.
He trusted them, and what they would deliver, he would say, "Okay, that's great, but kind of just adjust." And they would come back with the adjustments, and he would let it fly. And he's famous for basically having like a loose hand with his creators, his underlings, his artists.
Right. Right. And like I said, some artists, they want just give me the basic storyline, and I'll do the art, and you can tell the letterer what you want these characters to say once they're down on the page. And some artists, they tell me exactly what you want in each panel, and that's what I'll do. And I think that's kind of might be the artist's preference. It might be that they're just not sure themselves, and maybe starting out in the field. Um, but like I said, I did work with a few other artists on various small anthologies, comic book anthologies, and it was always a different experience with each one.
So you're a novelist, 100%, not going to be doing anything else. But do you envision this potentially becoming something else, or always just kind of being a novel? You understand what I'm asking? Did that come out right?
I think depending on how successful it becomes, if somebody else came to me and said, "Oh, I think this would make a great comic book series. Do you mind if we make it a comic book and pay you the royalties?" I'd be fine with that.
Would you be thrilled? That would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be ironic. It would be.
Would you be able to give it up though? I mean, say, okay, fine, here, I'll take some money for the rights. You go ahead and do whatever you want with it. It's your baby, right? I mean, if they,
I think need to have a little bit of a final say in what they're coming out with.
You would want some control, right? It's just I keep thinking about the Han Solo movie that's being made with Lawrence Kasdan and his son. These two directors who've got some, clout right now in the modern zeitgeist, so to speak. They put some really good movies together. They wanted to do a movie about Han Solo, and they got fired, didn't they? Because they were messing with this intellectual property in a way that the creators didn't really appreciate. And I find that really, really interesting. They probably could have had a really good spin on it, but the original, guys didn't like it. They got rid of them.
And that brings up a point too. And coming the other way, George Lucas. I think he's great at creating these characters and coming up with the stories, but as far as writing dialogue and writing the script,
oh my God, forget about it, right?
Yeah, I think he would have been better, like with the original or the new trilogy, whatever 1 through 3, if he had written the story down and just handed it off.
I heard a rumor. I hate this rumor so much. His first wife was a wonderful editor in her own right, but she had a lot to do with reining him in, controlling him, making him see the error of his ways.
Yeah, I heard that.
And the relationship soured. I don't remember when exactly. Maybe after Return of the Jedi, maybe before Return of the Jedi, which kind of makes sense in a way.
Yeah.
But it soured nonetheless, and we have Jar Jar. Thanks, George.
My kids love Jar Jar.
The kids love the Jar Jar, but the original fans do not love Jar Jar. I want to love Phantom Menace. I love Phantom Menace up until Jar Jar. I love Star Wars. When he re-released in 1997, I'll sit there and watch it and think, yeah, there's nothing wrong with this movie. There's nothing wrong with it at all until they crash land on the planet, Tatooine. And I'm thinking, okay, it's not that bad. And they'll show that first, what is it called? The stormtroopers on that dewback.
Mm-hmm.
And I just get annoyed every single time. I can't watch it anymore. Like, ugh, this is horrible. And I know eventually they're going to show a Jabba the Hutt being stepped on by Han Solo. And I'm thinking, I just can't do this. This is not the same thing. I had the download versions that were unedited just so I could get like a Star Wars fix occasionally. And I
Yeah.
think that's what happens. I mean, no matter what, you're never going to be satisfied, right? I published a novel on Amazon not too long ago. I'm not happy. I want to go back in. I want to add things to it still.
Yeah, it's like the story is just never done.
Never done. And you let somebody else touch your stuff. I mean, are you going to be happy with what they actually produce? Can you walk away from it? And I guess people do it all the time. I mean, Neil Gaiman, did you watch American Gods when it came out recently on Stars?
I have not seen that yet.
Did you read his novel?
Yes.
Great novel. And they did a really good job. But the guy had his finger in everything. I think he wrote the whole series. I don't know how he's even producing novels. I don't know how he does anything he's doing.
Yeah. Some of these really prolific writers, it's like, where do you find the time?
Right? Do you sleep? Is there drugs involved? I mean, how are you doing what you're doing? I mean, I really just don't understand it. I mean, this is like an endeavor. It's like hundreds of thousands of words, 500, 600,000 words that he's producing over the course of like months to make this thing happen. But I guess at this point, we're talking about millions and millions of dollars, so you can hire somebody to do most of the writing for him or something.
Right.
Can only guess. You know what I want to cover? You're an indie author, and obviously you've got to wear a lot of hats. And as somebody who's in the marketing profession, how do you do it? How do you go from a person sitting at his computer pounding out 80,000 words to somebody who people want to read?
It was a large, I guess, learning curve because I was always, traditionally published, and um, I sort of took a hiatus when my son was born, my firstborn, and spent probably 5 or 6 years just being a dad and working and everything, and came back to my writing, and everything had changed. Because in that time frame, Amazon had started.
Really mess things up for everybody, including traditional presses. I mean,
But
they don't even know what's happening right now, especially with like blogs and whatnot. YouTube, everybody can basically get their voices heard.
right,
Nobody seems to be making any money.
and when I had left writing, it was, oh, he's a vanity publisher, self-publisher, and that's what it was. It was looked on as, oh, somebody just wants to get their name on a book, and so it's kind of just vanity press.
Mm-hmm.
They're not really a writer. They're somebody something to stroke their ego with, kind of thing. And that was how independent writers were looked at.
Yeah.
And when I came back to writing, it was, oh, they're indie writers, and they're it's kind of looked at totally different now, as far as.
Would you say that an indie writer is legitimate compared to a traditional writer? I mean, do they have the same? Obviously, they don't have the same clout, or do they? Or can they?
I think they
How
can.
can
They can if they number one are lucky. Number two, have the right people reading their work. Somebody like what's
they?
his
Can't
name?
pass it off into luck, though, can you? They have to work really hard for that.
It's hard work for everyone, but just like, I mean, you talk about the music business or anything
Yeah.
else. There's a lot of people with talent that aren't getting that big break, and for whatever reason, whether it's luck or not being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I guess I have to give you that. It is kind of luck. Do you know who Andy Weir is?
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, somebody like The Martian that
Yeah. We're on the same wavelength. And it's
Yeah.
not even The Martian, because The Martian's a great novel, don't get me wrong. God, that thing sucked me through so fast. I loved it so much. The movie is not as good as a novel. I would not have probably even, I probably would have gone and seen the movie, but if I hadn't have read the book first, I wouldn't have been as excited for the movie. Just that was a great piece of literature, science fiction literature. I really enjoyed that a lot. But what started that dude's career is the egg. Have you read that by chance? I tell this to everybody. Have
No,
you ever read The Egg?
I haven't read anything by him.
Oh, you've never read The Egg? Oh man, if when we get off this podcast, you need to look up The Egg. I'll tweet you The Egg, a copy of it before I go back upstairs. This started his career. This is a short story. It's like 800 words long, maybe even less. It's been translated into 25 languages. It has it catapulted him from nothing to basically world fame. Are you familiar with Reddit? The website Reddit?
Yes.
If you go on the writing subs there, just about every single day, somebody will recommend you read The Egg by Andy Weir. It is the strangest thing. It's just a story of this guy who dies, and it's a death fantasy piece. But it has made his career. It gave him attention. People would go to his website. They helped him write The Martian. It's amazing that this one piece of short fiction catapulted him. And I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that, how did they discover this one piece of fiction that
Right.
this guy wrote? I mean, is it luck? Just luck. The strike of lightning for this one dude in that one piece of fiction. Can
Right.
we duplicate it ourselves? Can you do it? Can I do it? Can the countless other people out there do it? Can we replicate this one moment? I don't know if there's an answer to that. Do you think? I mean, I
Um,
have you on here as my expert. Do you think we can do it?
I'm at the point where it's just, I just work hard on it and
Hope for the best.
yeah, hope for the best and keep working hard.
Be the best dad you can be the best husband you can be, and
Right,
wake up tomorrow morning and do it all over again.
right. And, balance. I I work. I live close to Colorado Springs, and I work in Denver, downtown Denver. So I take a 2-hour bus ride to work and then a 2-hour bus ride coming home. So those, I have really long days of working.
Wow.
Um, and
That can't be by choice.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
but,
Colorado Springs is nice.
yeah. It's a nice place to live. It's um, it doesn't have a real big city feel, and plus I live in a town called Monument. It's north of the Springs, and it's a historical, just kind of tiny little town that right by the Air Force Academy here,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of living in suburbia and then traveling by bus to the big city every day.
And a big city. Denver is beautiful. I've never been to Colorado Springs. I know of it. You have the Army post there too.
Right.
Actually, it might be an Army Air Force post now. I'm not sure how that's working. It's
Um,
beautiful. I love it. I love Colorado. I'm very jealous of where you live. So much history. The Paleo Native American site in the south. You have the dinosaur fossil areas, the mountains. I mean, there's so much going on where you live. It's wonderful.
and I live at, we're probably right around 7,000 feet.
Do you
Um,
ski?
I've never skied.
Never. I've been twice. I hurt myself once, and then I couldn't leave the bunny slopes the first time. I was very scared. The only thing I could do is fall down to stop.
Right. They're getting a sled out there on a hill somewhere.
So it's not luck, it's hard work. You could get lucky. So I mean, what do you think? Are we just a part of the slush pile? I mean, there's so many of us out there doing what we're doing right now. You mentioned the vanity presses, how you put your name on it just as kind of an ego thing. I have this published book.
Right.
But for me, for you, when we sweated over our novels, we spent, agonizing hours over whether this word should be here or there. what chapter should go first? What are our characters' motivations? I mean, we sweated over these things. They're not vanity projects. They're pieces of art for you and for me and for a lot of other people who work on this stuff. We're not doing it because we want millions of dollars. We're doing it because, these things are in our souls.
Right.
I mean, but there are a lot of other people with us, and, they call it a slush pile. And the publishing industries are struggling too. They're being pulled down by this just monumental force of Amazon and whatnot. Even Amazon has moved away from selling books, right?
Right.
Kind of in a way. So, I mean,
Yeah.
what else is there? Nobody's reading. Nobody's attention span can last as long as a novel anymore, it seems, unless you're already reading, right? Unless you're a writer, it seems like. Then what's the solution? What's the world? What do you do going into the future if you're trying to make your living with the written word?
Right. I think it starts early. It starts with, kids our age and getting them to have that love of books, and not just, reading on a screen, just an actual book, and
No,
having that tactile connection. My kids read every night, and it's books. It's, they read on Kindle every once in a while, but they like going to the library and getting a book.
it's
And
interesting. So I wanted to ask you what your kids did, whether they read every single night with a book, a physical book.
yes,
Interesting. And that's
and
something you and your wife enforced.
not really.
They did that on their own.
It started with us reading to them every night.
Uh-huh.
Good moon, and um, but that kind of translated into them reading on their own.
That's
And
interesting.
I still read to them every once in a while. I just got done reading um, Once and Future King to them. Um, and they like me to read to them, but they also have started their own sort of love affair with books and being able to go to the library and pick something for themselves and read it.
That's fantastic. I always wondered what the magical spell is. And we do have them surrounded by books too. We have those board books and we just have them, in a very reachable place for them to just grab one. And they constantly grab a book off the shelf and they come up to us and they say, read, and we take it from them and we start reading the words out loud. And, they sit on our lap and just flip the pages and they take it from us and they go grab another one. And I guess that's how it would start, right? Because they love those books. They love hearing us read the words.
Right.
I really hope they do get that sense of this is a library and it's filled with things of marvelous content and that smell and whatnot.
Right. And, I'm just hoping that other people continue that as well with their children and get them to love books again. And so that it's not seen as a waste of time. Oh, what are you reading? When are you going to start doing something more productive? Kind of thing.
Yeah, I hope that doesn't happen. Unfortunately, they are going to run into kids that are carrying the Kindles. And unfortunately, I am like that too. And my wife is like that. I mean, I carry like 500 books on my phone. I have given up reading physical copies of things. I just find it so easy to have things on my phone, just read in the dark, and I can finish a book and have one right there at my fingertips. I
Right.
don't
And
know.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
But
That
I understand what you're saying, though. I mean, the love affair with books for me as a kid, I mean, times have changed. I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing yet or a bad thing because it is relatively new, right? We're not quite sure what's going to happen.
right.
But it
Right.
did take me a while to get into reading like this. It wasn't like an instant type of enjoyment level. I had to actually force myself to read on my phone.
It's interesting.
It wasn't comfortable. I had to read simple books. I had to read like the Star Wars books. I had to like read things that not necessarily were, very hard to get into that I really enjoyed, but that were kind of, not meant for very complex thought.
Mm.
And I read a lot of them and finally got comfortable. And then I moved on, harder fantasy. And eventually I was able to, navigate the books fairly easy. But still, it's easy to lose your mind. Not mind, it's easy to get distracted and close it out and go to Reddit or go to Twitter or something.
Right. Yeah. There's so many other distractions.
Yeah. And that's
And
the main problem. When you're reading a physical book, there's no, oh, I'm just going to close this book out and go to Google. You're reading a book, you're reading a book.
right.
So I tend to meander, and I apologize for that. There's just so many interesting things to talk about, and so short amount of time. In terms of marketing, how do you think you did what you've done? Obviously, your Twitter is filled with people who are interested in what you have to say. Is there a magical recipe to that, or is that just being cool and providing great content?
Um, I don't know if I would ever consider myself cool,
There you go. That's why you're cool, my friend.
but I just try to be myself
Yeah.
on social media, um, and I'm putting out there little snippets of my everyday life, my kids and fatherhood and experiences like that, and then also I really make it a point to try to support other writers and other
Mhm.
creatives,
Yeah.
whether
Not
it's
just writers, artists, and content creators, definitely.
and actors and directors and just
Yeah.
have
Anybody who's willing to reach into themselves and pull out that creation, I just love it. I really do.
right. So I make it a point to retweet other people and other because it's not a competition. It's
Mm-mm.
we're not competing against each other. We're
Competing with yourself, honestly. Make the best stuff you can make
right.
and
So
cheer other people on because they're going to cheer you on at the end of the day, right?
right.
Hopefully.
And I don't understand. I've been on Twitter probably 2 years now,
Hmm.
a little over 2 years, and I don't understand the writers or whoever that don't follow people back. It's like this is social media. We're here to support each other and to
Have
help each other out.
conversations. Be
Yeah.
sociable. Yeah.
And wow, you've got 6,000 more followers than who you're following. So what? you know?
Yeah, that is weird. But I mean, I don't know. I have a friend who says it's just impossible to, have conversations with 6,000 people.
Yeah, it can be. And plus with Twitter changing algorithms and everything else, it seems like you don't get to see the same people over and over, and you lose touch with people, especially when you have that many followers.
Yeah,
And so my wife yells at me all the time, but I try to connect with as many people as I can, just to hear their story and see what they're working on, creatively, and
totally.
um, it's a um, what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of a community of writers,
Try to form community, right?
right?
And that's what's hard about it because it does change so often.
Right.
I mean, and it can switch over and you lose track of people. And then you're like, oh, where'd that one dude go?
Yeah.
No, really enjoyed this dude. This one guy, his name's Hunter Motz. He is into um, you know, forming crowds of people to challenge the status quo. He's into challenging the educational system that we currently have. And I just thought about it the other day. He's like gone completely from my feed. It's like, oh, I wonder what happened to him. I look and he's fine.
Yeah.
He's tweeting along, doing his thing. He just hasn't been on my feed for a really, really long time. It's very interesting.
Yeah. And the current political climate, I guess, has has done a lot in dividing communities. Because it's brought out a lot of strong opinions of
Yes.
people, politically, and that's I think hurt relationships between people.
Families too divided. I mean, it's very reminiscent of the Civil War. It's very violent.
Yeah, but I
It's very
mean,
horrible.
you may be following somebody on Twitter and everything's fine, and you're talking about writing, and one little tweet about
This, that, or the other thing, and you're gone.
right, it's like, oh, I'm blocking you.
Yeah.
Why?
You gotta be
So,
very, I mean, you don't have, you shouldn't have to be very careful. You're allowed to have an opinion
right,
because your opinion could sway my opinion. And then we have a movement that could actually benefit a lot of people's lives instead of, I'm right, you're wrong, and I'm going to hate you because you're different than me. It's more like, oh, you have an opinion that's different than mine. Let me stop and listen to what you're thinking so that maybe potentially we can better each other's opinions and be better people at the end of the day.
Well,
Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way instead. Well, I don't know.
the old saying is, don't never talk politics or religion.
Yeah.
And you can see why.
Yeah, completely. But unfortunately, I think it's better that we do kind of talk politics. I would rather not talk religion, though. Unless we talk fantasy religion and mythology, that stuff is interesting.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm very interested in, you know, Egyptian gods and goddesses and Greek and everything else, historical religions.
You know what I'm also very interested in has how that stuff reflects in our modern religion as well. If you want to bring that stuff forward and how we're still kind of worshiping those sun gods, absolutely, we could talk about that all day long. But
My oldest son's, one of his favorite authors is Rick Riordan, and the whole Percy Jackson and God.
oh, right. I've never read any of those books.
Yeah.
My wife has a few of them, but I've never read them.
And it's been interesting to, he comes to me and talks about the Greek gods, and I tell him, the original stories are nothing like Rick Riordan's writing. He's changed a lot of stuff for his books, and so it's been good in a way because I've been able to set him on this track of investigating, the original Greek gods and goddesses and what the stories are, and um, he's found that very interesting in comparing the two.
I did a podcast with a medieval historian yesterday, and we were talking about oral traditions and how things get muddled over time, how we're not even sure what the original thing was that people are talking about. Just find it fascinating, whatever that thing was, whatever sparked the imagination that caused those stories to be brought forward. I mean, the fire that people gathered around that instigated that original thing that Percy Jackson stories are based on. And here we are, still talking about the same exact thing. I write fiction about those type of mythologies as well. I really like it. It just really makes my mind fire with creativity.
Yeah, there's always that, like you said, there's always that human element of what was the original story, and it's kind of like that exercise where you line people up and tell them something, and by the end, it's
telephone.
Yeah,
Right?
Yeah, I've kind of viewed religion in that way, where it's not the original message.
I mean, it's all right. It's all based on death, though, too. It's all trying to explain this thing, death and birth, trying to really kind of explain what it means, where we come from, where we go. And it's scary watching somebody die. It's miraculous watching somebody be born. Where do we come from? Where do we go? There are no definitive answers to either one, so we make up stories for it.
Right.
And those stories become more elaborate. And we still don't really have any answers. Unfortunately, brain studies don't even have any answers. It's really interesting. I love it so much. Even the solar system, we don't even have any answers for the home that we call, around the sun.
Right. And current science can only tell us so much, and then you discover something new, and it just changes the whole story.
Knocks everything that you thought you knew down on its butt. It's
right.
Really...
Pluto's not a planet anymore.
What? Pluto has a pseudo moon. What? There's an actual planet beyond Pluto. What? There are hundreds of planets beyond Pluto. I mean, it just keeps getting better and better and better. And like science fiction from 50 years ago, you might be interested in what the old masters were writing about. But honestly, you'd be reading that stuff nowadays, and it doesn't even make any sense anymore. It's like, oh man, why are you even writing this? It doesn't even make any sense. It's not even fiction. It's just gloop. Just made up. I love it. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
So we are reaching about an hour. Every single time I start one of these podcasts, I think, I'm going to time it. So when I mess up something, I can edit it out and seem a lot smarter than I actually am. I never hit a timer. So I have no clue if I'm actually at an hour or a little bit below. But I did want to uh, ask you if we covered everything that you wanted to mention before we said our goodnights.
Well, I didn't really come in with an agenda, so
Well, I definitely enjoyed the conversation. I think I asked you already. What are you reading right now? I'll ask you again, just because I want you to give the listeners an opportunity to pick up some of the stuff that you're finding entertaining.
you know, I've found that when I'm working on writing and getting down to deadlines for myself on my writing, I tend to go back and reread things as opposed to starting something new.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps me not just, kind of skim my way through other people's writings, but, it kind of gives me that ability to concentrate more on what I'm doing and not having to think about.
Oh, that's very interesting. So you reread like your favorite authors or people that inspired you to write your
Right,
trilogy.
right. So I'll read, whether it's Simon R. Green, his Death Stalker books, or C.S. Friedman. She's written a few books that I really like, science fiction books. Dune, going back even
Oh, wow.
I probably one of my favorite books is Dune. And I've got most of the newer stuff by his son and Kevin J. Anderson, and I actually haven't read all of them yet, but um, you know, and then there's a couple of books that I'm sort of reading to my kids with Harry Potter and things like that. Um,
You know what I had the thought the other day? Would you consider Harry Potter steampunk fantasy?
hmm,
Because it's magic and technology mixed together, sort of.
right. I've never really thought of it as steampunk, because I think the magic is so, I guess, overbearing as far as the world that they're living in, or the world that Harry discovers that other people are living in, is so much emphasis on the magic uh, aspect, um, and their the way that they look at Muggles.
Not very appreciative, though.
So that there's no appreciation for technology, I guess, when they have magic that can do everything.
Then there's that Weasley thing that kind of mixed the magic and the technology together. They have tents that are obviously muggled, and then they add magic to it.
Right.
They have the technology and the magic kind of mixing together. It's muddled, but it's there. Just a thought I had. Um, you have an opportunity to reach millions of writers. What do you tell them to continue doing what they love?
Um, I think just keep grinding. Keep writing, keep putting your thoughts on paper, or typing in whatever. My process is I always write a first draft on paper.
Do you
It's
do it longhand?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's impressive.
I've got notebooks of stone soldiers.
Wow. So you're on a bus 2 hours each way writing longhand.
Yeah.
Do you do your second draft on the bus too, or is that more of a?
My second draft is me typing my work into a computer and revising that way.
But you're at home doing that.
Yes. Yeah. The bus is always writing longhand,
That's
except
interesting.
a short story series that I just started on the new Omni thing that they kicked off. I'm writing at using my phone.
Is that Wattpad?
No, it's just the notes section on my phone. I'm just
Oh,
typing it in that way. Just a kind of an experiment, to see a new way of doing things, of
that's
writing.
so interesting. I've written a ton of short stuff for Reddit on my phone. I don't mind that. But for some reason, I cannot write on Google Docs on my phone. It's just a very uncomfortable experience. You would think it would be similar, but I just cannot do Google Docs. Where can we find you on the World Wide Web?
Um, Probably the best thing would be my website, which is briansconverse.com, and that has links to all the social media, all the where you can find my different writing, uh, and that former podcast that I did, which is that podcast that you were talking about was actually a radio interview. So I went up to a studio in Fort Collins and did a radio interview, and then later it was a live interview on the air, and later he cut that down to a podcast. So it was started as a radio interview and then went to a podcast. But
It's very interesting. I listened to the whole thing. It was very short, but he said he's done 150 of those since September or something along those lines. I was like jealous. It's like,
yeah,
what?
and
How'd you?
what he does is he brings in 3 or 4 writers at a time, and so they have that kind of interaction on the air forum, and then during that interview, he'll you know say, okay, I'm going to talk to this writer, and have 10 to 15 minutes of questions for him, which then he'll break down into a podcast. So each radio interview gives him 3 or 4 podcasts to put out there.
How was the experience? Was it kind of frustrating, stressful, or did you have a good time?
It was very interesting because it was the first time I'd done a radio interview. So going into a studio like that, I didn't really know what to expect. And it was a little intimidating where you
I was
know,
gonna say, like, my anxiety would be like through the roof.
you're live on the air, and um, you got this big microphone in your face and
Hmm.
talking into it. And it's like, is anybody actually hearing me?
I've done one other person's podcast, and she insisted on having a camera on me or recording me on, a camera. And all I could do is stare at myself. And the entire the entire time I'm talking, I'm looking at myself and I'm trying to figure out the best angle, and I'm flexing my biceps, trying to, okay, what if I angle, and I just look like a ridiculous like toad creature scrunching down, trying to get myself. Not good, not good at all. And then after we're finished, she's like, "You could have just turned off the camera." It's like, what?
Like,
Not good.
writers aren't physical specimens. We're
Hey,
bumps.
I run. I
Yeah,
work
but I'm just
out.
nobody's gonna mistake us for
No, you
five.
know what it is though? It's like when I think about myself as a physical specimen, it just gets worse and worse and worse. When my wife tells me to sit up straight all the time, honey, sit up straight. Okay, I can slouch like nobody's business.
I went to I took my wife, she was girlfriend at the time, to a Comic Con when we lived in San Diego.
Oh, did you go to the Comic Con?
Oh yeah,
Oh wow.
like I said, I went to University of San Diego, so I lived in San Diego for about 10 years, and so I was there pretty early in the whole Comic Con thing, where you could actually go in and talk to them, and there wasn't huge lines and
Oh
crowds.
man.
But we got done going to this Comic Con, and she looked at me and she's like, "Yeah, you're a writer. You look just like them." I was like, "Oh." She's like,
Oh,
"No,
then
but,"
you married her immediately because you realized.
he's like, "You all have glasses. You all have like a goatee or something. You all look like you've been sitting in a chair all day."
Yeah, I've got that spinal degeneration too. We're trying to do yoga. I'm like, oh, I can't stretch my lower back at all. It's horrible. It is horrible. Life. I don't know what you're going to do. Can't live with it. Can't live without it. Man, Brian, this is a fantastic conversation. I am so happy that you agreed to come on.
Well, thanks
And
for inviting me.
yeah, and I'm inviting you to come on when you finish your second one too. And if you have anything that comes up between now and then, shoot me a tweet. I'll have you on anytime. I really enjoyed this conversation.
I have too.
Good luck with everything, and I look forward to future conversations, and have a great night.
All right, you too. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that was Brian Converse. Coming up, I have an author of YA fiction, Andre Govier. He has specific messages that he wants to get out. Literacy is one. And then additional to that, he works primarily with Rett syndrome. It's a nonprofit work that he's trying to get the message out about this syndrome and how it's actually potentially curable, and the good work and the hard work that people actually put into getting the message out about this unfortunate syndrome that affects girls primarily. Great conversation. Really happy I got to talk to him. Follow me at BRYAIELLO on Twitter. BrianAyello.com is my website. I really appreciate you guys listening. Till next time. Bye-bye.